Today I'm just going to show you one or two of the categories of cameras, digital cameras for still photography, some of which are available from the Media Loan shop. These two cameras in front of me are DSLR cameras. You've probably got one of your own. Canon and Nikon, they're one of the most popular makes these days. I've also got a mirrorless camera, and I wanted to kind of show you the difference between them and the advantages and disadvantages. So DSLR, as I'm sure many of you know, stands for Digital Single Lens Reflex. The way in which they work is a little bit different to mirrorless cameras and to mobile phones, and I've got a cutaway model here. This is actually a film camera, but it's just to show you the insides, how it all works, how it all comes together. So the lens isn't on this camera, but normally when you point this camera towards your subject, the light comes through the lens at the front there, is refracted and focused, and then if you notice there's a mirror here angled at 45 degrees, surface silvered mirror. The light is bounced sort of from horizontal to vertical. The light travels straight up into this chunk of glass, which is inside the lump, which is in the middle of DSLR cameras. As well as the built-in flash unit, what's inside that lump is called a pentaprism. It's a chunk of glass with surface silvered mirrors embossed onto it. So the light bounces up vertically, bounces off the top mirror here, is reflected forward and then bounced off another mirror there, and then finally out the viewfinder. So when you look through the viewfinder of a DSLR camera, you're actually seeing the light rays that are bouncing off whatever it is that you're pointing the camera at. There is no electronic intermediate going on there, it's just a purely optical system, a little bit like a periscope in a submarine. That system's got one or two advantages. First of all, light travels at 186,000 miles a second, which is pretty quick. So when you look at the scene that you're photographing through that camera, you're seeing stuff happening exactly when it happens. With a mirrorless camera, as the name suggests, they don't have that angled mirror inside them, and this is the same for mobile phones and cheap point and press digital cameras as well. The way in which these work is the light comes through the lens in the same way as these cameras and then falls on a sensor, and the sensor is the thing that actually captures the image. The sensors vary in size from sort of the size of a match head on a mobile phone to on a decent mirrorless camera or DSLR camera. There's various different set sizes for these things, but they're usually anything up to about 25 by 36 millimeters, I think it is, on a full frame camera. So the larger the sensor is, the better it is at sort of recording high quality photographs. The sensor is covered with what are called photo sites. Each one of these things is like a pixel. It picks up the light levels and the color of whatever it is you're photographing, translates that into digital information, zeros and ones essentially, and then you can either use that to record the photograph when you press the shutter release button, or if you're looking through the camera, looking at the screen on the camera or in a mirrorless or mobile phone, it's turning that information from light to digital back to light again. So you're actually looking at a sort of picture that's been through this electronic process. Works fine. There's one or two disadvantages with the system, however. Particularly with things like mobile phones, the length of time that it takes to go from light to digital back to light again means that when you look at the screen, there's a very slight lag on between what's happening in front of you and what you're seeing on that screen. If you don't believe me, try with your mobile phone. If you switch it on and sort of wobble it around and look at how fast your arm's moving, you'll notice usually there's a slight delay, a lag between the movement of your arm and the image on the screen. On the mirrorless cameras, this lag is less, but it is still there to a certain extent. So for certain things like very fast action photography, DSLRs arguably have got the edge over mirrorless cameras. The other problem that you've got with mirrorless cameras is unless they've got an optical viewfinder, if you're actually looking at a screen, it's quite difficult to see under certain circumstances. If you're out in bright sunshine, as you know when you use your mobile phone, you get reflections and stuff, it's tricky sometimes. With the viewfinder that you've got on a DSLR camera, you haven't got any of that problem. You can see even in very bright light. In fact, you see better in very bright light. So it's less of an issue. The disadvantage of the DSLRs is this mechanism that they've got. I'll show you how that works. I've explained already how this system works when you look through the viewfinder. The digital sensor on a DSLR is behind that mirror. It's a little rectangle that's sort of embedded about there, okay? Obviously the mirror is in the way of that sensor, so when you take a photograph, you press the shutter release button, the button you press to take a photograph, and that mirror flicks up vertically. In front of the sensor is a set of very fine overlapping metal blades that move vertically upwards to uncover that sensor, then they drop back down again to cover the sensor back up for a predetermined length of time, usually 500th of a second or 250th of a second or something like that. So that mechanism is quite complex, which makes these cameras larger and arguably more complex, and it does tend to make them a bit more expensive as well. The other issue that you've got is when you look through the viewfinder of these cameras, you take a photograph, because that mirror flicks up to the vertical position, obviously there's no light entering the pentaprism then. So when you take the photograph, as those of you who've used DSLR cameras will know, everything goes black for a second, or a fraction of a second. You get used to it, it's not a huge problem. But you don't get that with mirrorless cameras. That's one advantage of the mirrorless camera system.